Hi again, everyone. Welcome to today's training. My name is Jessica Seward. I am Director of Customer Marketing here at ThreatConnect. I'm going to take a few minutes to just go over a couple of housekeeping items, and then we'll get started. So first, I want to let you know that everyone's phone lines are muted, just to keep background noise to a minimum. So if you have questions, please type them into the webinar console feature on your, or the chat feature on your webinar console. And we'll answer all questions at the end. Second, the webinar is being recorded, so we'll send that out as soon as we have it available, probably either tomorrow or Friday. And now I would like to introduce today's speaker, Tony Gidwani. Tony is the Director of Research Operations at ThreatConnect. In this role, she leads ThreatConnect's research team, which is an elite group of globally acknowledged cybersecurity experts who are dedicated to tracking down existing and emerging cyber threats. Tony previously built and led analytic teams at the Defense Intelligence Agency and joined ThreatConnect from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. She is also an adjunct professor at Georgetown University. So that's it for me. I am going to turn it over to Tony.
All right. Thank you for that introduction. As Jessica said, my name is Tony Gidwani, and thank you all for taking some time out of your busy afternoon to come learn a little bit more about the ThreatConnect Intelligence source. I'm going to go over a little bit of, what problems, what we're trying to accomplish, how our team puts the intelligence together that goes into the source, and then how you can navigate the source to find more value and intelligence that's specifically relevant to you. I'm playing with fire. I'm feeling very confident today. So not only do we have slides, but we're actually going to go into the platform for a live demo. So hopefully the internet gremlins are cooperative, and the construction crew that happens to be jackhammering outside of our office keeps things down to a dull roar. If you've got questions or comments or feedback at any point during the webinar, please feel free to throw those in the chat window. Or just in general, if you've got questions for our team, several of us are part of the ThreatConnect customer Slack instance. You can find me in there, tgidwani-rsch for research. And so we're happy to engage there as well, either on the content today or just your questions about best practices for ThreatConnect in general. All right, so this Giphy showed up in our work Slack instance a couple of weeks ago, and I thought it was really just a perfect analogy for the way a lot of us feel about the scale of threat intelligence data that we come across. Too often, it's a fire hose. It can be very noisy if it's not well curated, and most importantly, it's very difficult to establish a lot of times how this threat intelligence is relevant to your specific organization. And that's really something that our team, so our research team, in addition to producing the ThreatConnect Intelligence source, we spend a lot of time working with our product management team to help, drive new features and to make the ThreatConnect platform more responsive for our users, because we're in there every day as well, creating threat intelligence. So we have lots of ideas about how to make it better and less like you're getting blown away by a never-ending stream of data. So what we're going for here, and you may have seen this slide before, our VP of Product, Andy Pendergast, likes to talk about the TOW of intelligence-led operations, which is a different spin on basically the intelligence cycle if you're a little bit more familiar with that, right? So the purpose of intelligence is to create a decision advantage, right? We don't do this for its own sake. It's so that it can be actionable in the real world. And that should drive our understanding of how we should shape our own operations within the security sphere. And then by virtue, those operations create knowledge of the adversary in your threat environment, which should then feed back into your understanding of what type of intelligence you need and how it should be tailored. And so the ThreatConnect platform, helps our teams do this entire circle here. Both with in terms of the content that's going into your defensive mechanisms, and then being able to investigate, that information as it comes out to refine your understanding of your threat model. All right, so our source is built by our research team, and these are all of our lovely knot icons. because as you may have guessed, lots of researchers dislike the idea of having their actual pictures floating around on the internet. We're a pretty small group, so there's 8 of us in total, and our background's pretty varied. Some of us came out of government, but a lot of us came up through just pure InfoSec roles, whether that's practitioners at different InfoSec vendors or working frontline InfoSec for a large enterprise. So we kind of have a little bit of everything. We've got researchers who are sort of more pure play analysts and researchers that are a combination of analysts and some DevOps experience, which is awesome because we spend a lot of time thinking about how to balance the role between analysts and automation. When we look at our hunting processes that we use to feed the ThreatConnect Intelligence source, there's way more data than what our small team can get through on a daily basis. And that's probably a similar situation that most of you find in your organizations. And so what we do is we take a lot of time basically breaking down that process step by step to figure out which parts we can build automation around, whether that is enriching the data or basically spending less time moving it around from phase to phase in our analysis. And there are artifacts of that sort of sprinkled throughout the platform. Investigation links that you've probably seen if you've been on an indicator detail page is a really good example of that. We realized that as we were doing our work, there were always sort of a favorite list of other sources of information we wanted to check. We thought it'd be super helpful if we can get there with one click from our work in the platform to see what that was. All right, so the source. What the ThreatConnect Intelligence source is analyst-curated intelligence, and it's derived from our team's malware hunting and malicious infrastructure research. So we're hunting externally for badness in the wild. And it covers a range of different types of threats. So we're not just focusing on criminal actors or nation state. We get a little bit of both. We like to say it's a well-balanced diet of threat intel. And we also spend a lot of time looking at techniques, right? So we'll look at different ways that popular products, particularly Microsoft Office, are being exploited. We'll look a lot for how CVEs are being exploited. And so these are things that are relevant to an organization, whether or not you have a fine-grained understanding of if you've got a Russian hacking problem, or if business email compromise scams are the bane of your existence. So the high-level uses that we've seen from you, our customers, and if you've got thoughts on this or other bullet points to add to this, please feel free to toss them in to the chat, because we'd love to hear about it. The first is sort of that data out use case. Because everything in the ThreatConnect Intelligence source is curated by one of our human researchers, it has a very low false positive ratio. So this is one of the sources where you should feel pretty comfortable just turning it on and feeding that data into your SIM to look for matches. Because it is also analyst curated, it's not quite as high volume as some of our OSINT feeds, or some of the other bigger players. The next phase is sort of investigation. So when you get one of those matches, to come back into the ThreatConnect platform to gain more insight on something that's hit in your environment. And then sort of the third one, because we are building this content in the ThreatConnect platform, it's a very good demonstration of how to use our data model. So I'll show here in a little bit when we get into the platform the way that we tend to group indicators around incidents, and then how we associate those incidents to higher level objects like campaigns or threat actors or adversaries. And for a lot of teams, I think when they start out trying to create a process for their own incidents internally that they're going to work, this is a really sort of useful reference for how you can use the different features within ThreatConnect and sort of standardize your team's processes for things like tags, or what information you may want to put in attributes that's going to be relevant to your team. So it's a good reference for that as well, so for the structure of it, not just the intelligence content. All right, where do I find it? The nice thing is when you log into ThreatConnect and you pick that My ThreatConnect drop-down, you are going to see the ThreatConnect Intelligence source listed as the very first line item there under Intelligence Sources. It's also right above one of our other open source sources called the Technical Blogs and Report source, where we consume indicators and blogs from about 85 different sources right now. So it's also a really good resource, particularly when you get you know, the breaking news items, things like the bad rabbits and the NotPetya, where all the security researchers are writing blogs on this stuff. We've done a lot of legwork for you in pulling that into the platform and ingesting it so those indicators are available to you. If you don't see it there when you log in, contact your customer success engineer and they will walk you through the process to get that added. So a little bit more about what's in the source. Sometimes you just want to plug and play. You want to put this into, you know, your SIM and not worry about it unless something hits. And that's cool. We've got lots of customers who, you know, that's a successful use case of threat intel for them. And the source gives you value if that's what you're most interested in. You have lots of indicators of compromise that have been identified. They are scored by sort of evilness and our confidence in that threat rating. Tags are provided. So I've got here a screenshot of the top 10 tags that are in the ThreatConnect Intelligence source. So you can see advanced persistent threat, as much as I dislike the acronym, is nonetheless something that we focus on a lot in our research. And then also, most of our incidents will also include snort signatures. So those defensive signatures that you can download and ingest that are already ready for you right out of the box are available here in the source. And I mentioned that the source covers a range of material, that sort of well-balanced diet of threat intel. We certainly look at cyber criminal actors as well as nation state, and you can find intelligence in the source by sort of any number of logical groupings, right? We will tag based on vertical industry. So you can see in the chart at the right, there's an incident there that's got a finance and a banking tag. You know, same thing with malware family. CVE is one that we'll tag, as well as exploit, you know, where relevant. And so you can both pivot off of these tags to identify other content that is grouped the same way. And you can also follow these tags in ThreatConnect so that, for example, if you are a financial institution, if you follow finance and banking, when you get your daily email from ThreatConnect saying this is what's new, it will specifically highlight any content that's been added that has been tagged with those terms. All right, and then up to the strategic. One of the things, if you spend some time in the source that you may have noticed, is that we've basically built a threat library. And these are sort of dossiers on different threat actor groups. If you go in there, we'll take a look at one here a little bit later, you'll get a pretty good description of sort of, you know, what the group is, their greatest hits, their attack patterns and the malware families that they use, and you can see sort of the way that, again, we have tied incidents and indicators to these threat actor groups. So it's a really good reference if you're just starting your research or you're trying to weigh an indicator that's hitting your environment. You'll also notice as vendor name agnostic. I can't really do anything about the fact that every InfoSec company calls the same activity by a different moniker. We don't really have a dog in that fight, so we will tag all of the commonly known names. So that way, no matter if you're used to calling them Fancy Bear or APT28, you know, or Pawn Storm, we want you to be able to get to the information. All right, so how does this, if you think about this via the diamond model, this is a ThreatConnect webinar, so there's always got to be a diamond model in here because we love it so much. For those of you who are unfamiliar, who want a refresher, the diamond model is a method of intrusion analysis that posits there are 4 interrelated elements to any intrusion. So that horizontal axis, the capabilities and the infrastructure that are used, that's sort of your technical axis of analysis, and that explains how an attack happens. The other 2 points are on that vertical axis. That's the relationship between the adversary and the victim, and that tells you why an attack happens. And so the diamond model, one, it sort of is a foundational approach to the way we've structured the data model in ThreatConnect, but in this kind of way, it's also a really useful way to sort of organize your data to see you know, what pieces you may be missing as you're doing your research. And so if I were to talk about our source here using the diamond model, you know, I talked about the fact that the source is the output of our malware hunting efforts. And so that's where we're really, again, focused on that capabilities of the left side of the diamond model. We're using, you know, malware repositories. We've got a pretty robust set of YARA rules that we use to hunt for new malware samples. And then, you know, we'll detonate that, you know, using an AMA. We'll extract the C2 nodes. So now here we're coming across to the infrastructure node. And then from that point, we'll start to look at that infrastructure to see if we can find out anything else. Are there other suspicious domains that are being hosted? Have that registrant stood up other infrastructure we should go take a look at? And these tend to be the things that the pieces that will come together in one of our incidents. So that's an example of an incident that starts on that left side, starting from a piece of malware. We also have incidents that really live on that right side, where we're looking for suspicious infrastructure. So if you've taken a look at our blog series, you'll see that there's a lot of work that we've done, you know, showcasing and explaining how you can do this type of research, where we're looking at sort of the attack patterns an adversary will use to stand up infrastructure. Even though those individual indicators are very perishable, the patterns that adversaries use tend to persist a little longer. So here what we can do is look at the patterns in terms of what name servers have been used, who the registrant was. Can we detect patterns in the names of the domains that are being registered to give us clues as to whether or not this infrastructure is malicious and potentially tied to a threat actor? So you'll see those incidents in there as well, and you'll notice that the confidence level is not going to be quite as, the severity isn't going to be as high, that those are suspicious indicators because they fit these patterns, but we're not actually sure if they've actively been used in a malicious attack. Whereas, you know, if we're starting from a piece of malware, we're pretty confident that that's bad, and you'll see a higher skull rating on those indicators. So that's one way that we use to, you know, to convey the outputs of our different types of research processes to you when you look at this information. So the way that this information primarily manifests itself in the source is through the indicators themselves, and those are grouped logically by incidents, as well as sometimes campaigns. So where we'll look at a whole range of incidents, you know, following a common either time frame or attack pattern. And then you'll also see some of this reflected in tags, particularly incidents that are related to a CVE or an exploit. So that's sort of that horizontal axis. How does this now tie into that vertical axis of the diamond model? So those incidents are building blocks, and this kind of makes sense. If you're looking at a campaign or understanding more about how a threat or an adversary is operating, you need lots of those bricks to build a wall. And that's sort of the way that we build this up. So when you think about that diamond model, those incidents and infrastructure give us insights into the adversaries, and we use that then to continue refining our process. And you'll see that adversary information more captured in the source, in threat, adversary, sometimes in campaigns, and then again in tags, which is a way for you to follow along if you're particularly concerned about a set of actors. The victim, the way this is going to be most commonly represented in the source is in those industry tags. So where you can start to follow along by vertical of what's relevant to you, whether that's accommodation or media, again, banking and finance or energy, those are examples. You'll see the patterns that way grouped in victim. All right, the moment of truth, guys. We're going to see if this works. Did it?
Yep.
Woo!
You're good.
Okay. How's the resolution? You see all right? So if you have not logged in to ThreatConnect in this last week, this probably looks incredibly different to you. Over the weekend, we deployed a new update, 5.4, and the signature feature that you see here is custom dashboarding. So for those of our customers who are in a private instance, your customer success engineer will be in touch with you here in the coming weeks about getting that deployed to your instance. I have to say, we are incredibly excited about this feature, and the research team has done very little for the last 3 days besides play with this. Because the dashboards, basically are going to give us a way to organize a huge chunk of our team's processes. And I know that we'll probably do some more webinars on that here in the future. But I'm going to go to one that I created yesterday afternoon for the ThreatConnect Intelligence source. And basically all these cards are customizable. And again, you know, you take a look at the recent blog, and I think there's a video vignette as well talking about how to do these. But it's very intuitive. And we can use this now to kind of walk through what the source actually looks like in the platform. So all these cards here are pertaining to the ThreatConnect Intelligence source specifically. You can see here we've got one here that's going to take us through recent intelligence that's been shared over the last month. You can see the name of the incidents, the dates they were added, and some of the tags that we've been added to that content. And if I click on that, that will open up in a new tab, and we can go directly to that incident if we're particularly concerned about this ISIS-themed Word document. So as I mentioned, you know, one of the things about this source is that it's higher context. So we're not just going to spit a handful of indicators at you and tell you that they're bad. We're going to tell you where they came from and why we think that, so that you have that information available as you're consuming this content. So here, this is a Fancy Bear themed document, and you can see what it's related to, all the indicators that are associated, their threat ratings, as well, again, as that signature that you can take and deploy right away. Looking overall at the indicator breakdown by type, right, we can see that we're pretty heavy on hosts. I think we're at about, I think it's 80,000 total in the source-ish. Don't call me out on that. I'm doing random math on the fly here, guys. But you can see the overall breakdown by indicator type, as well as those group breakdowns, right? So in the source overall, there are over 1,300 incidents. We've got basically profiles built on 59 adversaries and 56 threats, 898 signatures, and most of those are going to be Snort, but there are some other ones in there too. There are Yara signatures, there are regex. There's probably a handful of Bro signatures as well, because the platform supports different formats. And then you can basically tailor these cards for whatever else you want to pull out. So here, I wanted a card that gave me metrics overall on the source and how it's performing. So these observations are what are being written back from bidirectional integration, right? So of the indicators we've shared, we've got 823, averaging about 13 per day based on what we're sharing out. About 3 false positives per day, which of course is 3 more than we'd like, but you know, I feel like that's a pretty decent margin of error. And then if you also look here, group attributes, there's over 6,000. And attributes are a useful way, again, for us to capture information that we want to be able to pivot on. Again, that starts to speak more to an adversary's attack pattern. So the fact that you've got so many attributes, you know, should help convey to you as a consumer that this is a pretty decorated source, that it's high context. And then again, the tags. So we've got here, you know, 72 indicators that we've shared out in the last week, and you can see what their observation count is. I'm sorry, these are the 72 indicators that have observations. That's what's on this card, as well as getting a sense for the context of what's being tagged, right? So several of the incidents that we've shared this week have dealt with Fancy Bear, and so that's tagged quite a bit here, both at the group and at the indicator level. And this kind of just gives you a good feel for what else is showing up here in the source, you know, over that period of time. And you can change this if you wanted to customize this in your own org. If you wanted 30 days, if you know, want it to look differently, you can pick different visualizations. And then I also mentioned the ability to use those tags. So one of the things I did was I saved a query looking at indicators that were tagged with finance or banking. So if this is the segment that I work in as a customer, this would be a really useful card to keep handy so that I can see how much of this content has specifically been related to my industry. That's not necessarily the only value you're going to get from the source, but it's certainly going to be relevant to you if it's hitting on your sector. And then same thing, I created another one for indicators tied to a name vulnerability. CVE is one area that we will tag because we think it's an important data point for defenders, and it oftentimes can be a good starting point when somebody is trying to do an investigation, right? Like, I've got this vulnerability, let me gain an understanding of what the threat is against it, and this gives you a way to conveniently access that information. So I can go, I guess I set these to indicators, but you could do groups as well. You know, if you click on any of those, it'll take you to that browse screen query, my apologies, where you can then see all of those different files. It also will pull up the query right here, so if you want to modify that, you can do that as well, and you can save those queries now, and that's what you can use to build your cards. So a lot of different ways, and this is really useful for a team because, again, you can kind of standardize, you know, do the work once, and then the whole team is able to leverage, you know, leverage that work. So I come back to this first incident we were looking at, and this is one that was just shared out today on this ISIS Word document. So a couple of other things I want to point out. We've mentioned tags, and you've got the signature and the indicators. If this is something that you wanted to do more with, like if this is something you need to hand off to, you know, to your boss or somebody outside of the platform, you can always download it as a PDF, and that will give you a nice, clean-looking rendition of this incident. And the other one is this copy to my org button. And this is a really great way, if you've seen something in here that's interesting or you want to incorporate it into your data, you copy it to your org, and it does exactly what the button says. It creates a copy of this content in your organization. And that way, at that point, you can go through and edit this, you can change attributes, you can do further enrichment, or take that indicator and associate it to something else that you might be actively investigating. And then this is still preserved here, you know, the clean copy in the ThreatConnect Intel source, because obviously you don't have the ability to make changes to the copy here in the source. So those are a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. The other thing that would be useful to see, again, is that threat actor library. So if I go to threats, here we go. So this is what there's a screenshot of earlier in one of the slides, where you can see these different profiles that we've gotten built out, and that we will add to over time as these groups continue to, you know, hack all the things. So for any of them, let's go ahead and do Lazarus group. Again, you've got those same functions for downloading the PDF for copy to your org, and you've got a nice description here of you know, what this group is, who they've assessed to be linked to, and what they've been up to. So what we're doing with these profiles is both sort of aggregating other publicly known reports as well as adding our own research to it. To be honest, as researchers, when we log in, I don't only want to see what one producer has created, I want to see what the community as a whole knows. And so that's sort of the approach that we've taken here. You know, in addition to adding our own insights and indicators that we're hunting for, we want you to be able to get in one place a pretty good overview of what the community thinks about the threat actor and what they've been up to. So you'll see security labels, and then here you can dig into any of these incidents if you want to learn more about, you know, the Bangladesh Bank SWIFT heist and the indicators that were associated with that, the WannaCry information, and then Operation Blockbuster, which is a really good assessment that Novetta put out, I believe last year, pertaining to Lazarus Group, and also has a lot of signatures associated with it. So we pulled those those Yara signatures from Operation Blockbuster into the platform, and those are also available for you to be able to download and use to your heart's content. As you look down, you'll see a little bit more, again, on capabilities, you know, the origin of the threat, their adversary motivation type, which in this case is both criminal and nation state, as well, again, as sort of, you know, vulnerabilities they're known to exploit. Just bringing it all together in one place for you. I think that is basically the high points of what I wanted to cover today. If you have questions or feedback or concerns, please let us know.
All right, thank you, Tony. If anyone has questions, go ahead and enter them in to the question part of your webinar console. We have had a few people ask about this, if it's being recorded, and it is. We will send out the recording to everyone who registered in the next day or two. We also had a question about when you will get the new dashboards. Soon, your customer success engineer will be in touch soon. That update is coming for those of you who don't have it yet.
I'm probably going to have to buy all those guys beers now for showing this in a webinar, but it was just so great, I could not do it.
It does look great. No other questions at this time. If you do have any, as Tony said before, you can reach out to us on our customer Slack channel or email, reply to the email that you get from GoToWebinar. You'll get a follow-up, and we will get your questions to the correct person. So thank you very much, Tony.
Thank you. I know everyone's really busy, and I appreciate you taking a half hour out of your day to come spend some time with us.
For sure. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.